Let me start from that particular perspective, from the political governance perspective. And as long as we have Dr. Ali Riaz with us, I want to start with him. To Dr. Ali Riaz, my question is, whenever we are talking about political governance, whenever we are talking about a democratic political governance, how should we actually define that concept? How should we actually sort of think about political governance in the perspective of Bangladesh? And how will you sort of, analyze the current state of democratic governance in Bangladesh? Over to you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. It seems to be there's some confusion with respect to the muting, those technical things here. Nevertheless, what I was saying, thank you. Thank you for this generous introduction, and thank you to CJS for arranging this wonderful session and giving this opportunity to join this esteemed panel. As you have raised, of course, there are two ways to assess the governance, and you are trying to focus on the political part of it. Let me put it this way. The way I see the question of governance and assessing, particularly when we are looking at the 50 years of celebration of Bangladesh, there are two ways to look into it. And as Dr. Shahan has quite rightly pointed out, the common attributes with respect to the governance, the ones usually used by multilateral organizations or the World Bank, so to speak, they use few attributes, and 6 of them are quite common and quite well known. Those are the ones: the transparency, accountability, control of corruption, efficiency, inclusiveness, and rule of law. In a sense, those are the operative part of it. Governance in the sense of the daily routine works that you can think of. That is one way to look at it. Its importance and its significance cannot be underestimated, or definitely I would not say that these are not useful. Of course, those are, and we will use those even in case of Bangladesh, when Bangladesh is celebrating the 50 years, or even if it is 100 years, we are going to use some kind of attributes to look into it. Over the last 50 years, based on these attributes, whether the Bangladesh has succeeded, or at least, as if are you asking me? I can barely hear.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I am asking you, sir. So, yeah.
Now, what I was saying is that the one way to assess with this, using these indicators, these attributes that we know of, and in this context, one of the major problems that we have seen is, say, for example, the transparency issue or the accountability issue. Particularly if you look at the accountability issue, in case of the governance in Bangladesh, throughout the past 50 years, the accountability, there are various ways of accountability. One, of course, is the vertical one that we know of. The vertical one is the electoral system to begin with. And over the last 50 years, what we have seen, if you discount the first 2 decades, because the first two decades, most of it was under the military regime, hence there was no reason for even expecting a sort of accountability, because the military regimes have ruled the country without any mandate. Hence, even before that, there has been tendency of authoritarianism despite the election. But since 1991, when we saw Bangladesh started its 3rd decade, the accountability mechanism that was supposed to be in place, the vertical accountability mechanism that was supposed to be there, is the election. Initially, there was a system that has emerged out of the caretaker government that would allow to have at least once in 5 years, an election which is fair, or relatively fair at least, and acceptable and inclusive, definitely. But that situation is gone. So if you look at this vertical accountability mechanism, that has left completely, left out of this accountability mechanism that Bangladesh could have, should have, and would have been. In a similar fashion, if you are talking about the horizontal mechanism of accountability, the civil society, or in case of the parliamentary system, as we know, the parliamentary committee. But given that the parliament has not actually functioned well in case of Bangladesh, and the parliamentary committees have not succeeded in managing or maintaining some sort of, supervision or monitoring of the governance part, that is the executive part, we didn't see much. But also in terms of this horizontal law, there are other ways of other mechanisms that should have been there. The institutions, such as National Human Rights Commission, such as SAC, that is Anti-Corruption Commission, or other organizations that could be, the civil society organization could have. But even if we take that, the horizontal mechanism would be the ones which are constitutionally mandated, such as National Human Rights Commission, such as this Anti-Corruption Commission. None of them actually function. None of them practically function because whoever is in power have never been committed to this accountability mechanism. Even today, if you look at these, what we have seen, National Human Rights Commission has not been has not taken up any issue that would make the incumbent uncomfortable, so to speak. When the Anti-Corruption Commission, Chief of Anti-Corruption Commission recently, who has just been retiring from the ACC, has said that he would rather prioritize the image of the country. That means, and make compromises, according to him. So these things are clearly that the institutional mechanism of constitutionally mandated horizontal accountability mechanism has not worked, unfortunately. Then if you take the societal mechanism, that comes from the civil society, that comes from the media. In case of Bangladesh, there's a large number of media, and often it is argued that the media works because we have so many media, so many outlets, television channels and newspapers. But given the relentless attack on the civil society, vilification of civil society that we have seen over the years, once there was a very vibrant civil society in Bangladesh, which could have been, initially there had been some kind of accountability, at least the demand from accountability. But that didn't continue because of over the past decade or so. What we have seen, two things we have seen since 1990. One, in case of civil society, one is the politicization of civil society. That means clearly a partisan nature. And this partisan nature has fragmented the civil society and weakened it. And eventually, through the vilification and other attacks, practically it has decimated over the years. So here we go. I am just taking one of these elements. Then if you look at the inclusiveness or rule of law, take for the case of rule of law, we know that until 2007, there hasn't been any substantive effort to make the judiciary independent. The relationship between the executive and judiciary was so tilted toward the independence of the judiciary was completely non-existent, despite the fact the Constitution actually talked about it. Hence, we have seen in 2007, unfortunately, a government which was not mandated to govern came forward and done it, which reflected the court's verdicts. But what happens? Recently, retiring justice of the Supreme Court has mentioned that it is only on paper. He didn't go further than that. But he told us that we know. So let us assume that we do know what is the situation. If we do know, then rule of law, over the last 50 years, even now, when a justice is telling us that it is only on paper, we can understand the situation. And then, all these mechanisms, all these institutions that were supposed to be built, has not been built. Rather, what we have seen is the concentration of power. And in case of Bangladesh, particularly after 1991, when Bangladesh moved from the presidential system to prime ministerial system. Prime ministerial system, I'm deliberately using that one as opposed to parliamentary system, because what happened? Yes, of course, Bangladesh officially own constitution moved to the parliamentary system. But when it moved to the parliamentary system, it has transferred the power of presidency, lock, stock, and barrel to the prime minister. And given the Bangladesh constitution and Bangladeshi political party gives the individual leader of the party so much power, and then constitutional power, the power has concentrated into the hands of the prime minister. Whoever that may be, that's not the point who is the prime minister. We have seen since 1991. Gradually, this is called executive aggrandizement. Prime Minister represents the executive party. Hence, when the Prime Minister is, or Prime Minister's office and Prime Minister personally is having this kind of power as a leader of the party, as the Prime Minister, as the leader of the parliamentary party of the ruling party, and then you have Article 70, which does not allow the members of the parliament to speak out vis-a-vis its own party. What does happen? It happens that practically, on the one hand, it is shutting the accountability mechanism completely off. On the other hand, we have seen that there is no way of asking for any kind of transparency. And that is what has happened. So if you take those indicators, but then again, what I would say is that let us for the moment move away. Move away and look at what the Bangladesh, the political party, Bangladeshi constitution and the Bangladesh proclamation of independence. Both of them actually laid out that what should be the goal of this country and how the governance should be assessed.
Right. So can I just...
If you look at that, what happens is that is what they say, that they had a mandate. They came up with this proclamation because they had a mandate. Right. And that is what is missing in this case. In case of Bangladesh, the fairly acquired democratic mandate is missing.
Right.
And the second thing, and I will stop there,
I want to interrupt here for a minute.
The second point is the power to the people. Basically, Bangladesh constitution says that all powers in the republic belong to the people. If there is no way of representation, if the popular sovereignty is undermined, then how would you expect that the governance would be assessed? This is the basis of the assessing the governance. That is how I see.
Right.
On both counts, I don't see a very positive thing.
So I will come back to you. I mean, due to time constraint, I have to sort of move ahead. There are several issues that you have raised regarding the role of the institutions of accountability, how they are failing, how the democratic system has kind of faltering. We will come back to those issues later. But you kind of set up kind of a good stage for the next question, that when we are talking about all the failures of the democratic system, we still see that Bangladesh is improving. Bangladesh is making achievements in the development area. That is why we often consider Bangladesh as a development paradox. Yes, Professor Ali Riaz, if you can hear me.
Dr. Shahan, if we want to look at the future is made today. Future is not something that is going to emerge out of nowhere. The current trajectory that we see with respect to the institutional building, there's no incentive from the incumbent for building these institutions. Rather, they would prefer not to have those institutions. As Dr. Badullah Mujumdar has rightly pointed out, the institutions, if we call it non-state actors, they are practically decimated, weakened, silenced, and the constitutional institutions have not been built as such to supervise, to monitor. So what is the pathway? What is the trajectory? The trajectory is until and unless you go back to the basics, which Bangladesh constitution has insisted on. And that's why I think the primary thing at this point on the question of governance is with respect to establishing the right and of the people to be part of the governance. Here, how do you become part of the governance if there is no fair election mechanism? And that is what is more important. Election itself is not going to solve it, but you cannot bypass that. And that is one thing. And that's why consent of the governed is absolutely necessary. Fairly acquired democratic mandate is necessary. Without those, Bangladesh may achieve some economic growth, which also is lopsided to some extent. The governance situation is not going to improve. I do not see any possibility other than the trajectory is a very non-inclusive governance, and increasingly that will turn into an authoritarian system.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Aliajan. Thanks for. I've been given the opportunity to take one more question. The gentleman over there, and then I will come back to the panel.
Thank you, sir. I am Mahata from Center for Governance Studies. My first question is to Famida ma'am, is that since considering the political instability in Bangladesh and other social status, do you think Bangladesh really in a position to talk about good governance, where the governance situation is not in a good hand?
Okay.
Sir, I have a little another question to Badurahman sir.
I think let's, I mean, if you, because we are out of time, yeah, I mean, I just want to give an opportunity to Dr. Ali Riaz and Dr. Badurahman to respond. I mean, we have a couple of observations and things. I mean, the big question, the main question that has come up is whether Bangladesh can actually be considered a role model for development with all its problems and all its corruptions, allegations of corruptions and the other problems. Dr. Ali Riaz, very, quickly if you want to sort of, respond, and then I will go to Dr. Abdul Alam.
If I have understood the question well, the
I
question
mean,
is whether Bangladesh can be considered as a role model despite all these things. Is that the question, Dr. Shah?
Yes. The main question is, considering all of the allegations that we have, about corruptions, about politicization and others, should we actually consider Bangladesh as a role model of development?
See, it depends on the perspective, whether you want to be a role model of what. Having what we have discussed, what Hamida has already brought in, and that, yes, Bangladesh is making progress in terms of the growth, but this growth has been so lopsided, and the disparity has increased. So, if you are considering a part of it, that growth has been achieved despite bad governance, is it the role model? Is it the pathway? Is it replicable? I don't think it is replicable. The role model has to be replicable. I don't think it is replicable. Hence, for me, the perspective is whether it is inclusive. Whether you are talking about the growth, economic growth, or you are talking about the political system. The non-inclusive part, with lack of institutions, where partyarchy has become practically the modus operandi, and then we have this new patrimonial thing. That means the resources, state resources, are being used for patronage and networking. All these things coming together, I don't see that can be a replicable model for anybody. Even for Bangladesh, going forward, Bangladesh should take a very clear look at it, that whether this is a sustainable model, the corruption, the neo-patrimonial networking, and this rent-seeking, is it a model that Bangladesh should pursue? Besides that, if we go back to the fundamental question, was that the promise of 1971, that this is the kind of Bangladesh we would aspire and establish? I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.